Parlo sopra eventi 28 anni fa, quando io sono giovane. I'm going to start in 1978, which was the year that I graduated, and an important year for British hackers. This was the year that the magazine Personal Computer World was first published.
Ok, il suo racconto comincerà dal 1978, che è l'anno in cui lui si è laureato, ha finito la scuola, non sono sicuro. Ed è stato un anno molto importante per la scena inglese, diciamo, perché la rivista Computer World Magazine è arrivata, diciamo, in Inghilterra.
Siamo sicuri che c'è qualcuno che non capisce l'inglese? Chiedevo.
Volete una traduzione, no?
No. Chi la vuole? Alzate la mano se la volete.
Se volete traduzione, alzate la mano. Se no io me la risparmio.
A posto, risolto.
Ok, there's no need for translation.
Okay. Complimenti tutti. It was said, if you could actually find the subscription list for the first year of Personal Computer World magazine, you would have a list of all the top people in the British computing scene. I think this is true because my name is on it. Many of my friends also subscribe to the magazine, and this year we start to retire from the scene. We're too old. We're leaving the world open to you, our inheritors, and you deserve it because you've done better things than we have, as I will explain. It's a good time to look back and to see what a bunch of enthusiasts who became hackers, who became the leaders of industry, started, and how we disrupted the industry of the 1970s to the 1990s. Yeah. So I intend to entertain you. This is not a very serious technical talk. I'm going to give you a British view and an egotistical view, that is my view, of what happened. Everything else that anybody tells you is wrong. I am always right. This talk is based on my memories, it's based on the work of my friends, and it's based on discussions with some current colleagues on the internet so that I could actually tune my memory to be more perfect. If you want to study the history of this, I recommend the freely available text, The Hacker's Handbook. It covers only the very early years of hacking, but it is the inside story of how a British hacker started his career. Published by Hugo Cornwall, who was actually really somebody called Peter Sommer. If you go to his site, pmsommer.com, there is an e-doc version of the book there, and it's an entertaining read. But you must remember one thing: never expect any anecdote about hacking to be truthful. They're always lies. Okay. Up until this time, the only way that you could get access to a computer was to be a British academic of some sort, a student or a lecturer at university, or to work in an industry that used computers, but there weren't many of them at the time. Changed for us with this. I don't know if anybody recognises this, but this is a computer, and the first computer that was available cheaply to the British people. It cost £40, which sounds cheap. It's the price of a good theatre ticket today. In 1978, that was my week's pay. So I had to work for 5 days to afford this and not pay the tax man. What was important was not what it could do, but what it inspired us to do later. The memory on this, by the way, was 640 bytes. That's about the size of a very small packet on the internet today. And you could only program it, I don't know if you can recognise here, in hexadecimal. But what wasn't important was what it was, but the inspiration. We had to learn to do things for ourselves at a very low level. So all of the popular computers that came out at that time had faults, and one of them was they had no serial port at all on the majority of computers. The ZX81, the ZX80, the Spectrum, none of these had a serial port. If you wanted to communicate to the outside world, you had to build a serial port for your computer before you could start. So I damaged many fingers, I choked myself with fumes, but I managed to build a serial port. Following a more advanced magazine, Wireless World, which gave details of how to build a UART, that would actually communicate with the outside world. That would give you access to the university computing system through an RS-232 port, not to the real world. Because if you wanted to get onto the bigger computing systems, you needed a modem and you needed telephone line access. Well, of course, affording a telephone line was quite difficult then. It was very expensive. And the modems were almost impossible to discover. You really had to look for one. So, towards the end of this period, access was limited to a few university departments and a few big companies. Almost all the long-distance communication was actually by something called teletype, which still exists. It's still used between legal firms and banks in the UK, since it's one of the few legally admissible ways of communicating. It's a point-to-point connection between two modems, and it communicates at the impressive rates of 75 to 300 baud, approximately 75 to 300 bits per second. The post office in the UK, who ruled the world at the time, as far as we were concerned, would not allow you to directly connect a system to their network. It was actually a criminal offence to connect your system to the network. So we had a solution to that. We ignored it. One way around it, to stay legal, was to actually use an acoustic coupler. This could communicate at 300 bits per second. Here's a picture of a typical acoustic coupler. You can see you just put the handset for the phone in there, and you connect your computer here. Then you have to set up the call, or select the protocol for the call, just using switches, no software configuration. You just select how you want it configured. If you're lucky, you then dial the telephone number by hand, put in the telephone handset, and with luck, you'll get a connection. With luck. Okay? But things were beginning to change. By the end of the 1970s and start of the 1980s, the British government realised that the post office was killing business in the UK. If you wanted a telephone in the UK, you had to make an application, and if you were lucky, they would provide the telephone line in 3 months. If you were a private householder, maybe a year before you could have it. If you were a small business, maybe a year, because you weren't very important. Britain wanted to be international, wanted to communicate with the USA, particularly. We couldn't do it, or we couldn't do it easily. So the government decided to split the post office into postal services, which would stay public, and telecommunication services, which would become private. It sold off the telecommunications division as British Telecom, still going today as BT. The rules on connecting your equipment to the phone net were relaxed in stages. First of all, they said, okay, you can connect some piece of equipment not made by BT, but it still has to be inspected by BT before you can connect it. Within a few years, just go and buy a telephone in a shop and plug it in yourself. Because, as Andrea said, nobody was hurt, nobody died, there was no end to the world. It was realised that the whole of the post office rules had just been stupid. So now we could start to talk to each other. And that started some of us thinking about what we could do. Now we could talk to each other. Okay? So we are standing at the dawn of our bright new age. As Shakespeare said, how beauteous mankind is, O brave new world that has such people in it. And we were the young people who were going to take this on. This was a golden age. From 1981 to 1992, there was an explosion in two different ways. One was the companies that made computers. From nothing, the UK went to having a large by standards of the time, personal computer industry, and also a diverse computer industry. Lots and lots of different companies competing in the same space. It was just creativity. People weren't bothered about the money. You opened a computer company not to make money, but to get computers to people. Often these companies were making huge losses. They hoped that... Does this remind you of anything? Small companies making huge losses, hoping to have something coming back later on in life. Because this is the story of the internet, nearly 15 years before the story of the internet, of the World Wide Web. When people started to commercialise the World Wide Web, it was exactly the same. Lots of companies opened with a big idea, no money, not much of a clue, and they opened and went bankrupt really quickly. But then Darwin took a hand, and the companies that could survive became the companies that you now know. So Google, lastminute.com, booking.com, TripAdvisor, all these things started, eBay, they all started as tiny ideas in people's bedrooms. This was how the actual computer industry started, both in the UK and the USA. If you could imagine something in 1978 to 1980, somebody would make it. We didn't know what to do with our computers. We bought them. We started to learn about them as soon as we had them in our hands. We didn't have customers. We didn't have a boss. We didn't have a company telling us what to do. We just had our own computer. And we didn't sleep much. Very few people knew what we were doing. As today, parents had no idea. You went off into your bedroom and played with a box for many hours, and at least you were quiet, so they were happy, until they got the phone bill. Second-hand, but better, but much more expensive systems were also becoming available. As universities and companies, mainly accountancy companies, realised that their computers were getting old, they sold them off, but they had no idea what they were worth. So you could pick up an Apple II for maybe £40, £50, because it would be in an electronics shop in a pile of junk in the corner. And that was so much better than anything else that we had, that we grabbed these machines very quickly. But our real liberation started with Sinclair, the ZX80, ZX81, and then in '82 the ZX Spectrum. This was very quick. These computers were coming out year after year after year, getting better and better as they went. So we had cheap computing, we had young people, we had lots of imagination, and we explored what we could do. Okay, this was, the reason that this magazine was important was starting over on the left-hand side in 1978 and going through to 1982, I think that is, sorry, 84. This was how we actually learned the basics of computing. This magazine for us was everything, because half of that magazine covered details of how to code, how to access systems, and half of it covered what the computing scene was. All the contacts for bulletin board services were published in here. The addresses of the locations that you could go to meet other people with the same ideas were published in here. We lived and breathed from this magazine. Help. Battery problem. I'll keep going. The other thing that played a big role in what we were doing was the British Broadcasting Corporation. They started at the beginning of the 80s to sponsor the development of a new computer. They did this because they wanted to teach people how to program computers, and they thought it would be a good idea if they had a standard computer that you could buy that would be used with the series. So they sponsored Acorn Computer to produce the BBC Model B. Acorn being Acorn, they decided that it would be a good idea to do the best that they could with this machine. So rather than just producing the simplistic, stupid machine that the BBC wanted, they produced a machine which was actually, for the time, very, very good, with lots of interfaces and the ability to add second processors to your computer, hard disk drives, floppy disk drives, the sort of thing that you wouldn't expect to see on a home computer of the time. It was also used during live TV broadcasts, so a presenter would actually teach you how to do your computing homework for the evening on the television. This quite remarkable distance learning. The logo for the programs was this digital owl, which became important later. Okay. So, in 1983, a BBC TV presenter tried to show users how to use the Telecom Gold email service live on television. The BBC's account number was well known. Generally, the usernames were not protected in any way. You just know all the users of the Telecom Gold system because they would be published in a directory. Hence the owl. That mailbox was hacked during the live TV programme to show a message. The message was, computer security error, illegal access. I hope your television programme runs as smoothly as my programme worked out your passwords. Nothing is secure. Well, I think you'll agree, that's just classic hacker. He didn't steal anything, he didn't damage anything, he just said, I'm here, and I've owned you. The BBC then claimed that this must be a very, very sophisticated hack attack. BT, who owned the service, agreed, because BT would not admit that their system could be hacked easily. It would be a terrible mistake for BT to say that hacking was easy. The BBC claimed this isn't just a stunt, this is something terrible. This is people trying to hurt the BBC, trying to hurt BT. And the hackers said, this isn't true. It was just a simple hack. It was based on a weakness in the BBC software. And we'll never know the truth, but I believe that the real reason for this is that the TV presenter was really lazy, and he used a 3-letter password, which he entered live on television every week, the same password. I may be overthinking this, but I think I know how they did it. Okay. Long before the internet, 1979, the GPO opened its own online information service run entirely through the telephone. This supported only asymmetric V23 modems, so you could download at 1200 bits per second and you could upload at 75. Again, does that sort of setup look a bit familiar to everybody? Because that's how we run DSL at the moment for home consumers. We allow them to download speedily, and we restrict how fast they can upload to manage the load on the servers. So again, no new ideas anywhere, things are pretty conservative. The services that you could get through Prestel: online banking, home shopping, mail order shopping, forums, chat lines, travel timetables, travel ticket purchases. Again, almost exactly the same services that you get on the World Wide Web, but all run through an interface from a long time ago. What Prestel didn't give anybody was security, and BT didn't want to talk about this at all. They only had part-time security staff. They stopped work at 6 o'clock in the evening. So nobody's watching you after 6 o'clock. So when did the hackers connect to the system? 6 o'clock. For 2 reasons. The telephone calls were free after 6 o'clock. That's an incentive to start late in the day. And nobody was watching them. It's perfect. So you now have unrestricted access to a system where the sysadmins don't come to work until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Prestel was deeply insecure at a level. The BT staff shared their credentials between demonstrator systems and live TV systems. As you know, this is don't do this. But that was how they set it up. BT assumed that business users who were on the system from 9 in the morning till 6 at night were well-behaved, nice people. They paid money to use the system. They paid money for a premium service. They're going to be nice people. And home users? Well, Prestel are just using them to get the numbers up to make it look like people are interested in their service. And home users are stupid. They don't know how to use a computer. They will just sit and use the interface that they're given by British Telecom and just poke the buttons. They won't do anything clever because they're not computer professionals. BT had obviously forgotten about the hackers, or didn't care about the hackers. So in 1985, two journalists, who are rather famous, Steve Gold and Robert Schifrin, hacked Prestel. Now their version of the events is maybe not true. Schifrin said he was testing a modem and he accidentally entered some random page numbers, which just accidentally happened to give him access to an internal directory page listing all the phone numbers of all the development mainframes. He also says that an administrator had left system credentials on the login page of the development mainframe. Now, the username for that page was 22222222. The password was 1234. So, Schifrin was in. What could he do? So working in silent hours, he was able to access the system without any supervision. He learnt that he had system manager access and he could delete all the security alert messages and logs before he left the system. So BT were completely unaware that what he was doing because the logs were blank when they arrived in the morning and nobody thought that was unusual. Schifrin actually reported his concerns to BT. So he's a very honest hacker. He gives them a call and says, "Do you know that your system is completely insecure?" And BT say, "We're not interested." So Schifrin decides they should be interested, so he decides to make them interested. So what better way to make them interested than to access the mailboxes owned by some of the most prominent public people in the UK and to report what they had done. So they reported to Micronet. Now Micronet was a service which ran on top of Prestel, and it was the service that gave home users access to the system. So again, they've been ethical. They haven't damaged anything. All they've done is to call BT and say, you know, not only is your system insecure, but we can prove it's insecure. Things changed within a few hours. Some people were very angry. These people were very angry. Very, very, very angry. You can see she's not pleased. The Queen. They accessed Prince Philip's personal mailbox and published the contents. Margaret Thatcher was very angry because that year they were planning to sell British Telecom. And how can you sell a company whose selling byline is, British Telecom, we're easy to hack? It's not going to go well for the sale of shares. So Margaret Thatcher decided that something must be done, and the police were then involved, and the security services. Schifrin and Gold were arrested, but as we've heard earlier from Andrea, immediately the law is on dodgy grounds. There is nothing that they have done is illegal. They have not stolen anything. They have not damaged anything. Maybe they stole a little bit of electricity, but not much. So what are they going to be charged with? So the answer, as in Italy, is let's look at the law and take something from the law that was not meant for this purpose and make it apply to what they did. So what they tried to do was to charge Schifrin and Gold with forgery. They claimed that they had forged the administration credentials. They were convicted of forgery. They then started, as it would here, 5 years of trial, appeal, counter-trial, appeal, going right to the highest court in the UK, which at the time was the House of Lords. And they were acquitted. The House of Lords said they didn't do anything illegal. There is no law that makes this illegal, and copying a password is not forgery. So they were exonerated. Schifrin and Gold became two of the best-known security researchers in the UK. Sadly, Stephen Gold died a couple of years ago, which was a great loss to us all. Robert Schifrin still operates as a security consultant and a journalist. Okay, so all these details are disputed. That was Schifrin's version. Others claimed it was simpler than that. Schifrin went to a technical demonstration where British Telecom was showing off how good Prestel is. And he simply looked over the shoulder of the BT staff as they entered in their passwords and their usernames. So he just remembered those, wrote them down in his notebook, and then went home to try it. Several people have said the same things, not just him. He is famous because he actually did something. Lots of people said that they stole the details at the same event, went home, tried it, and thought, yes, I can hack into Prestel, and then stopped because they didn't have any interest. You can actually try to find out the truth of this if you wish. We have, in the UK, the National Museum of Computing, which is based at Bletchley Park, famous for Alan Turing and for Enigma. So if you look at tnmoc.org, you will actually find the route through to the notebooks. It's on the front page, is that they tell you there. And just to remind you, never expect any hacking anecdote to be completely truthful. We all make our part sound bigger than it is, and we all make other people's part sound smaller than it was. And I think this has happened here. Okay, so what actually happened after that was, well, the politicians weren't going to take defeat. They had to do something. So what they did was to create the Computer Misuse Act 1990. This made life easier for the police. That simply says, if you hack into somebody else's computer, you have committed a criminal offence. You don't have to do anything while you're in there, you don't have to do any damage. Just to access that system is a criminal offence. It's a stupid law, because there are situations where I think I, or people like me, should hack into other people's computers. Security instances. I think, sorry, I have to say, I profess an interest, I do a lot of work for the government. But if some guy is going to be throwing bombs around the park this afternoon, I think it's reasonable for me to hack into his computer if I can, ahead of the event, to find out the details of what he's going to do. I can't. The Computer Misuse Act says you can't. There's several other laws that say that you can't. So it tends to slow down the investigative process in the UK, because quite rightly, I suppose, it depends how you balance it. Do you put data protection above your physical security or your right to life? It's a discussion that's still going on, but you have to bear in mind that when you create law, the law has both consequences you want, stop children accessing computers, and consequences you don't want, stop government accessing computers. We make our choices. The Prestel service was never ever a commercial success. It had a maximum of 100,000 users, which couldn't even cover its costs. The hacking event didn't help. What else has happened? So, as a consequence of that, eventually it was followed by a company called Demon Internet, which I'll come back to. The other consequence, idiots still use 1234 as a password or a PIN. I think if you notice, there's been several reports now of hacks where people have stolen password databases. 1234, I think, comes up as either the first or the... I cannot remember the order. It's either the top of the list or it's second after password. So people are still not very clever. So, as a hint, if you want to start hacking, build yourself a rainbow table that includes password and 1234, and if you want to do a really good job, go and look at things like the Adobe password hack and just copy all the passwords in there, because the chances are that about 1/3 of the accounts you try to hack will use one of the passwords in that file. Organisations are still failing to secure their systems adequately, and salesmen still do stupid things like logging into computer systems at trade shows where hackers are shoulder surfing. So again, if you want to get into somebody else's computer system, find out who they are, follow them around, and look over their shoulder. That is the fastest way to hack into a system. And also the biggest fraud that I've ever been involved with was exactly that. Somebody looked over somebody's shoulder, got his username and password and stole, I think it was £160 million. Okay? There were more technicalities to it than that, but the primary thing that got him in was just looking over somebody's shoulder. So, this long period, from 1979 to 1990, hacking in the UK was possible, and it wasn't illegal. So, did it make us the home of the hacker? Did it mean the golden age of the hacker? So, yes, no, like everything. One of the problems was, yes, you could hack, but what would you hack? Because there wasn't much in the world to hack at the time. The number of systems online that you could get access to were very small. It said Presto, 100,000 users. There were bulletin boards that you could access through dial-up telephone nodes, but there were very few of those either. And most data that was important was stored offline, and most of that wasn't stored as an electronic format, it was paper. So you don't even have a chance of hacking anything important, because all the important stuff is in a filing cabinet under lock and key. We didn't have script kiddies to speak of. I mean, everybody did things the long way around because the tools didn't exist and the means of communicating didn't exist. If we wanted to swap information, we did it like this. We got together and we talked to each other. These face-to-face meetings became known as meets, carne. And that comes from meet space, to meet someone in physical space, which I think comes from William Gibson, Necromancer, maybe. Billy Gibson popularised the term cyberspace in Burning Chrome, and suddenly we were starting to become slightly cooler than we had been. From being the people that they locked in the back rooms and tried to keep the paying customers away from, suddenly, occasionally, they would run us out in front of a customer to talk geek to them, because the customers wanted to hear geek, because they were buying technical systems. But so, you know, we've got to this point. We have a name for our space, but we don't have much space. We can hack without fear, but what can we hack? Most of our hacking is war dialing and social engineering. It's not particularly clever. We are not people who are engineering clever ways of getting into systems. We are effectively brute forcing everything that we do. So my view is, was it a golden age? I don't think so. I think if you want me to pick a golden age, you're living in it now. Despite all the restrictions now, you are in the golden age. So at this time, we started to notice that we were becoming interesting. People wanted us to talk on television. We had been geeks, we had been freaks, we had been people that nobody was interested in. All of a sudden, the Prestel hack raised our profile. Popular movies like War Games and Tron meant that lots of people were suddenly more interested in computers and saw them as interesting things. And how do we know this? And the answer is because at parties, we became people who walk backwards. This is a feature that is common to anybody who works with computers and lawyers. Anybody experience this? You go to a party and you stand with your drink and somebody comes up to you and says, "You're that computer guy, right?" "Yeah, I am." "I want to talk to you about that computer, my computer. I've got a home computer and it's not working very well." "Yeah? Really? Interesting, yeah? Yeah, when I switch it on, I get a funny message. I don't understand it." "Yeah? Really?" Doesn't matter how fast you run, they still find you. So, me. Until the mid-80s, I was doing medical research. I used supercomputers, so Crays and Cyber 170 730s, which were big. I don't know if anybody here has ever seen a Cray, but you can sit on it. It's actually designed for you to sit on. It is a huge semicircular array of seats with computing platform underneath it, and then in the middle there's a tall structure which is full of liquid, and that's the cooling. So again, we've come full circle. The Cray was water-cooled, or your gaming PCs are probably water-cooled. It would take hours of coding to get a job ready for the Cray. It meant very late nights. Sometimes all I had to do was just sit there and wait for it to finish. Sometimes I was bored. I was at the University of Manchester, which has been famous in computing since the 1940s. It was the place that Alan Turing went to when he finished at Bletchley Park. Sadly, it's also a place where he died, which we can't be very proud of. But he sparked a research department with a tremendous influence on British computing. They had their own network, which connected together just the universities in the north of England. So we were learning to program networks and hack networks in the early 1980s. By 1983, this had actually become an X25 network joined up to the Joint Academic Network. That is, all the universities in the UK connected by one network. Again, no security. And the reason this time is, why would you want security on a university system? You just want the students to come in, explore computing, get used to it, explore new ideas. So they provided us with huge libraries of programming languages, huge libraries for graphical tools, and you got a password and an account, and that was it, you were in. But you could find anybody else's account and password, and they were all trivial. Admin was admin, for example, and so on. So we used to explore a lot, but all very good-natured, just people finding out what it did. There were no limits on how many times you tried a password. It's very useful. I was using Pascal, which was a handy language for me. It was higher level than most of the languages available, not as difficult to use as Fortran. C was an infant language. Hardly anybody was using it at the time. But Pascal had a unique feature, and that was when you wanted to read instructions from a keyboard, the keyboard buffer was just another file. But it was actually a file that had random read-write access. It wasn't documented, it was just that you could. And I found it by accident. I found that I could write passwords into the keyboard buffer. So what I could actually do was to run a Pascal program which filled the keyboard buffer up to the top with password attempts, exit the program, run it, and sit there while it tried to hack its way into somebody's account. If it failed, you'd load it up with another batch of passwords and off you'd go again. And I was able very quickly to go in. The system had been designed to cope with what we called ASR33 teletype terminals. These are an electric typewriter with just a roll of paper that comes out of it. They're very slow. You couldn't guess many passwords on an ASR33. It would take you too long to type them in. But I was able to throw in passwords at the rate of thousands an hour. And since nobody was checking me, eventually you could brute force your way into accounts. I actually cheated by swapping the ASR33 for a Commodore PET, because it was faster. I then cheated again by using an ACT Sirius, which was faster again. This was an alternative to the IBM PC, and to my mind, a lot better computer. But I could leave the PET to try a dictionary attack. I didn't know that it was a dictionary attack, I just thought I found a cool way of pre-programming passwords, and I just thought I had tables of potential passwords. So what did I find? Nothing. Let's face it, this is the life of a hacker, isn't it? You spend hours getting into something, and when you get in there, it's boring. My God, it's boring. I did find some interesting code for a maze game, which I adapted and used myself on the Tektronix oscilloscope screens that attached to our network. Graphics wasn't very good. We just had some vector graphics, and you would have a large square oscilloscope connected to the system, which you could draw graphics on. So it would draw a maze outline and then move you through it to square at a time. Very popular. The academic system operators tolerated us. I mean, they just generally thought that if we got in, we were interested, and they were there to make people interested in computers, and we were interested in computers. We weren't doing any damage, so they didn't mind. If you did any damage, then you were in trouble. But mostly, they were kind to us. If someone from outside the university managed to access the system, they were tolerated. They're doing no harm. Maybe if they try this for long enough, they will go to university and learn to do how to do it properly. However, after 1985 and 1990, it wasn't just discouraged, it was a criminal offence. It shut down a whole area of interest. Okay, so, the sport of hacking should only be indulged in by those who are aware that they may find themselves in breach of aspects of the law. That's from the Hacker's Handbook. I am a coward. I am not going to break the law. If I break the law, something bad is going to happen to me. So because of that, I've had a long career in places where having a criminal record would have meant I couldn't walk past the door. So this is something for hackers to consider as well. You know, what sort of hacker do you want to be? If you want to operate entirely outside the law, or if you want to work in the commercial space where they don't care about your criminal record, fine. If you actually want to go and work in government, or if you want to work in some of the more bizarre corners of government, you have to keep your public profile clean. So make your decisions, bear in mind the first statement. If you're happy to be arrested, get yourselves arrested, I don't care. Anybody heard Gomez? Gomez, the pop group? Yeah? Get yourself arrested. One of the greatest songs on their first album. Okay, so in 1992, a gentleman called Cliff Stanford contacted some of the users on Kix and said, if 200 people would get together and pay a subscription, he would provide a dial-up internet service. We stampeded with our money in our hands towards Cliff Stanford. So on the 1st of June 1992, two of my good friends now, Cliff Stanford and Giles Todd, opened Demon Internet Service for business. I was one of the first people to get an account. You got, for your money, a static IP address, which was brilliant. I got my own domain, and I got a message from the sysadmin saying, you're on your own, because we don't know what this thing is. So I had to do it myself. Giles Todd, I didn't know at the time that I registered, I didn't even recognise his name, but he was actually somebody I had known since my days at university. He was the anarchist in the student union. Again, I'm not going to stereotype, because I can see a few about here, including myself. He was the guy with the beard and the glasses who sat in the entrance to the student union and sold anarchist books. And would do peace and love, man, as he walked into the student union. I had no idea, but it influenced his thinking in a very interesting way. He said, the internet is the only true anarchy. And I think he's right. Nobody owns it in particular. Nobody can direct it. They can suggest and they can issue RFCs and they can hope that people will listen and follow them. But in general, it's an anarchy. When it comes down to policing the internet, it's an anarchy, largely still. If there are badly behaved ISPs out there, they don't get largely taken down by government, they just get cut off by the community. If you're not going to play ball with me, I won't play ball with you. That is the way this anarchy functions. And I agree with him. I think it is a wonderful example of how you can actually organise social systems and social events without having an overarching authority. Okay, so Demon, devilishly good broadband. In those days, it was the most anarchic ISP ever, but always well-intentioned. All of the dial-up numbers that they had ended with 666. I can remember Cliff Stanford being asked on television, Demon, isn't that going to inflame the religious right? And he said, wait till they see our telephone number. By sheer chance, the company, number of the company, the registration number, also ended in 666. Now this is remarkable, because you can't order a company number to be anything in particular. You say you want to build a company, and the Inland Revenue give you a number, which is just generated at random. So maybe there is a God. The company and its key staff played a central role in British internet access. They were the ones who drove and pushed and popularised the internet in the UK. They were the ones who said it is a right for people to have access to the internet. Now, this is a ludicrous statement in the 1990s, but they kept pushing. Sadly, today, Demon Internet is a brand of Vodafone. The company owners are millionaires, but the clients are nice, normal people who do nice, normal things, and all of the old clients have gone somewhere else. I'm not saying where. So you can actually discover, if you want to find out some of the characters, the character of Demon and some of the characters who took part in it, by having a look at their Demon local and Demon service groups from the time. This was where all of the controversy originated, was propagated and ended. If you decide to read this, you'll have to be tolerant of bad behaviour, swearing, stupidity, but they can be very entertaining. So, in September 1993, AOL offered Usenet access to its users. And they say, there's no nice way of saying this, they were dumb. Boy, were they dumb. Every September before 1993, there used to be an experience that the new users would start to use the system. So for a month, you'd have people coming in who didn't know how it works, and it would just be full of, is this how it works? Can somebody help me? I just typed this in and it doesn't work. Can you tell me how it works? And so, my computer is nice. Hi, my name's Mary Jane and I like pie. All of this would come. Within a month of flaming, effectively, their behaviour was moderated. They were educated that there was a way to behave. Sadly, AOL never learned. The commonest thing you see from AOL users is somebody writes something and they write after it, me too. Why? Why are you saying that? I don't need you to tell me you agree with this. This is just stupid. If 500 of you say me too, it's not only stupid, I can't even see the messages amongst the drivel. Stop it. No. Since then, one of the shorthands that came into being is AOL, in angle brackets, is a sarcastic way of saying, me too, I'm as dumb as a rock. Sadly, Usenet has been in continuous decline as social media has expanded, where the stupid people still exist. Okay, so after some time, 2001, Demon became famous for a landmark court case, Godfrey versus Demon Internet Service. Again, is anybody here familiar with this? Oh, good, right. The very first case of libel on the internet, the first one pursued through the higher courts. Somebody wrote some bad things about Godfrey, because Godfrey was an arsehole. And so I can get away with this, don't report my words back in England, but he was. He spent all his time on the internet trolling and winding people up, and didn't expect them to retaliate. And this time, somebody lost their temper with him, and they did a very good job of libelling him by claiming many bad things about him, about his relationships with children, with animals, and so on. This was pure libel. Godfrey took the case all the way through to the House of Lords, and he won. Because he had instructed Demon to remove the material from their servers, and they didn't. So it was a fairly clear-cut case that not only had the libel been on their servers, but they had actively published it. So they were responsible. He got some damages from them, which he very kindly gave to charity. After that, I decided to close my account with Demon, not for moral reasons, but probably for slightly immoral ones, which was Demon's lawyers then started to attack their own customers. They were referred to by the users as the crack legal team, which is rather sarcastic because they weren't very good. They demanded that all the users sign a declaration that if Demon went through anything similar in the future, we would pay all of their legal expenses, every last penny. It's an open check. I refuse to hand somebody a blank check and say, here you are, tell you what, if I do anything bad in the future, just use that check and pay for it. That would be stupid, so I told them I was going. Demon then began a policy of deleting any content which they thought was libelous. I was not very well behaved at this time, so I listened to what my child said, and I wrote a Perl script that scanned all of Usenet looking for defamatory postings made by Demon users. Now, under English law, almost anything you can say can be defamatory. It's very easy to commit libel in the UK. So what I was doing was tying down my enemy, the crack legal team, for months and years on end, because they have to respond to every complaint that is properly formulated, and I had a template letter. So it was a proper legal complaint about libel on the internet that was submitted, and I think at one point it was submitting probably 60 complaints a minute. After a few months, DEMA decided it would change its policy. So I regard that as a minor hacking success. Again, as I said, nothing that you'll hear from me is a killer hack. These are all simple-minded things. So, as the 90s were now coming to a close, we were finding that the real world had entered our world. Lawyers on the internet. I don't know where he's gone, but there was one out there. Boo, hiss. Lawyers. Businesses. Fees. Fines. All of a sudden, we were back in the real world again. A lot of us just felt as if we were losing our innocence. A lot of us felt as if we'd had this thing that was ours, that was uniquely ours. We'd created it, we'd played with it, we'd created all the social conventions on it, and these people were coming in and were taking it away. But, you know, was this really the end of a golden age? I don't think so. As I said, I think I should encourage you. What we did was really simple, easy. We were like children. We picked up shiny things, we looked at them, went shiny, 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 and then threw them away. Many of us founded an industry, but these are what are termed accidental empires. We weren't setting out to found multi-million industries. We were just setting out to do what interested us. Other people were interested, and suddenly these accidental empires appeared. So one of them was Apple. You know, it starts out in the back garden, very, very back garage, similar to HP. All of a sudden, you know, it's one of the biggest companies, if not the biggest company in the world. There are many others like that. Today is the golden age. Why is it the golden age? The networks are faster. Hackers are more skilled. Every time I meet a hacker, I'm impressed by how good they are nowadays. There's more targets, more things that you can attack, and you get paid for it. If you can find the right website and hack it, and you can explain what you've done and how to stop it, you're up for a bug bounty, and some of those bug bounties are well worth having. Okay, so some good news for people like me, though, is it's all coming back. So the Internet of Things is taking us back to the 1980s, because the Internet of Things is done by people with the same sort of attitude. There are lots of devices being created which have no use. They probably have no future, but people are making them because they can make them. I'll talk about some in a bit more detail in a moment. I've got a bunch of friends who are called pen test partners, and their job is to be professional, ethical hackers and to hack into systems. And they have started to look at the Internet of Things, and some of the things that they've hacked recently. The smarter iKettle. That is a kettle which connects to Wi-Fi, and you can turn it on with your iPhone or your Android phone. Again, if you've ever been to an English home, you will find one feature that I found all my Italian friends comment on that I never thought of is, all the English have an electric kettle in their home. It's not something you see very often in Italy, but we all have them. They're coming for you, also. They have produced the smarter coffee machine. Don't buy it, the coffee's awful. But it also has the chips in out of the smarter iKettle. There's the Mitsubishi Outlander, which is an SUV. The Mitsubishi Outlander connects by Wi-Fi. It does it in the most stupid way possible. The Star Wars BB-8 toy, also fairly weak on security. The VTech InnoTab Max, so bad that a paedophile can hack into your child's toy and talk to them through the internet. The Ring video doorbell gives any attacker an unsecure Wi-Fi access point onto your network in return for having a doorbell that you can look at on your phone and see who's ringing the doorbell. A thermostat, which we're not going to name because that would be wrong, but somebody could actually boil you, well, get you very uncomfortable in your own home just by turning up the thermostat to the maximum and leaving your gas-fired boiler firing all day long. The spot cam security camera, which allows anybody to see what you're up to in your bedroom. And possibly creepiest of all, my friend Kayla. Again, anybody heard of Kayla? Sold through Amazon, I think. Sold in lots of places. Let's not blackball Amazon. It is a doll that will talk to your child. What it actually is a Bluetooth headset. That's all the components that are in it. Is the components out of a Bluetooth headset. On your phone app, you have a MySQL database, which is full of things that your child would like to hear from its doll. So you can enter some of these words in yourself, or you can use the pre-programmed library. And it will say American things like, "Hi, I'm Kayla, I'm your best friend ever. Can we go shopping? I really love you." All that sort of stuff. Hurl. In the hands of a Brit, we could do something better. That chip has got machine gun noises in it. How cool is it to wake a 3-year-old at 2 o'clock in the morning with machine gun noises? The parents would hate you. But you can access the SQL database. It's not encrypted, it's not secured. You can just put whatever text you like into that database. And they send a gust. So, as soon as the parents have gone to bed, and the little girl lies down with her doll, the doll starts to speak to her. "Hi, I'm Kayla. You can't trust your mummy and daddy. Your mummy and daddy don't love you. The only person who loves you is Dave. Dave is outside in his car. Why don't you go and say hi to Dave?" It's scary. And there are many other devices. The reason these are so poor is because they're using old chips. They've got no security features, they've got poor security features, they've got hard-coded passwords. The standard password on these devices is 000000. If you're not sure about that, if you can find what chip it is, you can just go and look at the manufacturer's notes and they'll tell you what the default password is. Guess how many people change the default password? Almost none of them. They're not interested. It's a doll, it's a kettle. Why would I change a password on it? So, these things are backdoors into your system. Just pick up some notes from over here. I'm sure somebody... My friend Ken helpfully wrote me some notes because I can never remember this. Okay. So, I'm just going to go back to the iKettle. So the first question is, why? Why would you put Wi-Fi into a kettle? You can turn it on from your bed. You still have to get out of bed to go and make your cup of coffee or your cup of tea. It's not going to bring it to you. It's a pretty pointless device. Potentially it's quite interesting having consumer devices that will do things for you, but the closest to this that we had in the past was a thing called the Teas Maid in Britain. And this would work off a mechanical timer, boil water, and then use the pressure of the steam in the water, this is safe, to squirt that water out of the heating device and into another container where you had put some tea. Then, a little time later, it would ring a bell to let you know that your tea was now ready to drink. Great thing in the 60s and 70s, those. The standard wedding present to all new couples. As we said, you've got the coffee machine coming your way as well, so you're not immune. So how did Ken attack this, my friend Ken? First of all, he port scanned the app to see what was going on. They disassembled it, they took everything to pieces, they found the chipset manuals, they went through the source code, they tried to find code fails, they found some, they owned them, they owned it. But what was interesting was that their attack could then be pretty easy. So they reverse engineered the Android app. Are people interested in this stuff at low level? Not wasting my time or your time, am I? What they did was to use ADB to extract the app from the phone. Then they decompiled it using JDEX, so they actually had a listing of the source code. They could figure out how the code worked. They edited the bytecode using APK tool, or they could simply edit the resources that it used on the phone. It's a similar method of attack for all things, so it's fairly straightforward to attack these apps. Then they could recompile it, they could sign it with a key, and they could distribute it, because Android's great like that. You can distribute hack code quite easily through the store. In the kettle, they found something really interesting, is that, you probably can't see, but it uses a Wi-Fi transparent UART made by, well, if anybody's interested, I'll let you look at the page. Their logo is just unreadable. But these Wi-Fi modules are simple-minded. And to go back to my era, they are commanded through the Hayes modem at command set. Hey, I know what's going on. This is my era. You simply send it at codes in order to set up this module. And they're straightforward. You just send it text that says at, and then there follows a keyword that tells it what to do. Amongst the codes that are supported by this module are at pass. If you send it with parameters, it will change your password. If you send it without parameters, it will tell you what your password is. I think I can see a flaw. Okay. Even better, once the Wi-Fi kettle connects to your internet, to your Wi-Fi, you can send it the command at plus key. Guess what that gives you? That gives you the private shared key from your Wi-Fi in plain text. So anybody who can access this kettle immediately has the credentials to access your home Wi-Fi. So Ken reported that to the manufacturers, and their response was, let's go back to Prestel, who cares? Why would you care about this? It's just a kettle. Why would you care if somebody can hack a kettle? Besides that, you buy the kettle, you take it home, and you don't tell people that you've bought a kettle, or you don't publish the details of your address and your kettle on the internet. Yeah. And so nobody knows where these kettles are. It's not important. You're just making a big fuss about nothing. Has anybody heard of Whittle or Widle? Might be mispronouncing it in Italian, but it is a service that you can go to on the internet, and you can type in the SSID of any Wi-Fi device that you want to find anywhere on the planet, and it will give you a Google map on which it has overlaid the location of all of those Wi-Fi devices. I'd recommend you try it. I've tried it here. Believe me, there are a lot of people in Pescara who their details are out there on widle.net. Sadly, mine are on there. I've tried like the devil to expunge them, but I can't, so I've had to change my base station ID in order to be able to continue with the level of comfort that I feel. But we can find all of these kettles, and it goes with all the other devices. We can find geographically where they are. Then someone could drive to your house, get within Bluetooth range, access your kettle using the standard setup and the standard password of 000000, because he knows you haven't changed it. Then he has access to access your Wi-Fi and start to download his porn or whatever it is that he wants to do. All of this stuff is preventable, easily preventable. They only need to change the security slightly, and all of these things were noted and fixed for university systems, for Prestel, for other big systems in the 80s. It's a fair disgrace that all this stuff has come back to haunt us. I'll knock it on the head there, but if anybody has any questions, I'll be pleased to answer them. Anyone inspired to be a commercial hacker? One of the things that you might take off as a model that's useful for the future is that the UK runs a scheme called Check. And this is where people who wish to be hackers, professional hackers, can actually obtain a qualification in hacking, pass an exam and be certified as professional hackers. The possession of a Check certificate means that you can go to a company and you can state, I'm an ethical hacker, I operate within a framework of agreement, I can hack your systems for you and I can tell you how to fix them. I'd recommend anybody interested in hacking to start petitioning their government to provide a similar scheme. I think it shows us as the good guys and shows what we can do that's positive. So thank you all.